Good morning, everyone. My name is Praveen Sathyadev. As the person introduced me, I have over 14 years of experience in marketing with 12 years of digital experience, ranging from being a catalog store manager to what I'm doing today. I head the analytics delivery for Blue Ocean Market Intelligence. Blue Ocean is a niche data analytics company. We specialize in connecting the dots and ensuring there's a strong data foundation with a BI layer on top of it and doing advanced analytics on top of it. So that's basically our business. My role currently revolves around helping our marquee clients in connecting the dots, helping them drive insights and build some data foundation. That's basically what I'm currently working on. And as the introduction rightly mentioned, working on a framework that can build some foundation for data analytics. That's something that I'm really both personally and professionally working passionately on. Um, I want to quickly introduce the topic. I know the link says it's web traffic, driving web traffic, but I will be actually talking about digital monetization strategies. It's because of a small schedule change. Apologies for that, but I hope the presentation is interesting for you all. First thing first, when we talk about digital monetization, the first thing that comes to your mind is web publishing and web assets, specific to the content world, right? But my a little presentation today is going to be not focusing on the web publishing specifically, but it's going to go beyond that. So I just want to call it out. And also, when it comes to monetization, we all think of two things primarily, right? Basically, advertisements, which is basically all the ads that you place online and how you make money out of it or value out of it. And second is consumer led. You know, consumers come in and transact in with your digital property and make a transaction and or add a value. I do want to add a third layer to this because traditionally the industry has been focusing on ads online and the digital space, the digital ad industry, if you will, or the media industry, if you will. And then there's a consumer-led journey towards digital monetization. But there's a third one that's evolving, and it's evolving rapidly than we know. It's basically innovation-led. Many organizations today are focusing on building innovative ways to monetize their digital assets. While I understand, putting specifics to digital assets today is very complicated. Let me explain with an example. Um, every other company that wants to go digital today believes in going to two big guys. Uh, we can talk about Google and Facebook here, right? And interesting to say, 90% of all conversions that happen today, I'm talking about legitimate legal conversions, are attributed to these two big guys. One focusing on the web itself, the search world, if you will, Google, and the other one is a social media giant. So these two guys, in some way, connect more than 90% of online digital conversions happening today. And as easy as it may sound, many companies don't get it. They go invest in Google, they go do paid media, they reach out to agencies, they reach out to different vendors and channel partners, you name it, and they eventually do not make anything out of it, or they end up spending more than what they can spend, or the most important challenge, they're never able to attribute what they're spending to revenue. Classic challenges might sound cliche, but this is the world we live in. Um, I'm going to be a bit data and analytics biased, mostly because I come from the industry right now, and I strongly believe that digital analytics is going to change the way people do business today. Because with data comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of empowerment, which enables you to make decisions beyond what we could do maybe 5 years ago, or even a couple of years ago. That's the length and breadth at which we work with data today. So my anecdotes and my references are going to be more towards data and analytics. And apologies for the biasness here, but I strongly believe that's something we need to really focus on. Okay, I'm going to build my strategy based on three broad pillars, and I can get into the specifics if anybody's interested and can ask questions. But I'm going to talk about three broad pillars, and these pillars are going to be essential in building your monetization strategy. Number one, intent. Um, as cliche as it may sound, most companies do not build a very strong digital intent. And what is a digital intent? A digital intent is kind of a vision statement. It's kind of a vision or a mission statement that you kind of develop upfront. What is your strategy around your digital journey? And this is kind of crucial because most companies believe that by getting the fancy gadget in the market, a fancy technology platform, or a fantastic vendor can solve this problem for them, which is absolutely wrong. There are so many use cases where companies have spent billions and millions of dollars and they've ended up with nothing. So, and let's kind of subtly understand the buying process here as well, right? People are buying these technology services or any sort of affiliated services here are from the legacy background. So we're literally simply shifting an offline business to an online business. When you do this, the leadership comes from a very strong offline attitude, if you will. And for them, the online transformation or the digital transformation is not very clearly painted in their head. So they end up spending a lot of money with not having clear intent and not having means to measure them, which is why the first building block of this strategy is having a very strong digital intent with clear KPIs well defined. I'm going to give you a few use cases, and I'm not going to take names of those companies, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the industry. We're talking about one of the largest semiconductor company, which builds a lot of chips for computers and other high-tech gadgets as we speak, and they have significantly implemented and or kind of put in money in their digital marketing experience, if you will. Personalization, building cool content, monetization through content strategy, and so on and so forth. And they've ended up spending around $120 million, if you will, if my numbers are correct. And they particularly are sitting in a pile of money spent with no ways to attribute them to revenue. It's a very clear case that this is not related to how much money you have, what kind of capabilities you have, what kind of market share you have, or it kind of does not have any correlation to any of these things, which we always believe is correlated to it, right? So interesting enough, they solved this, right? It's not that they did not. They solved it by using simple things. They went back, they scrapped all their investments, they went and took back a lot of capabilities that they had outsourced in-house, and they started building this competency in-house. It took them a few years, but it worked, and it truly worked. Why? Because they went in with a very strong intent. Um, Again, KPIs are very important. How are you going to measure this? For example, a simple one is conversion. Everybody talks about conversion, but the definition for conversion is so different in every other industry that you deal with. It also differs by what your marketing goal is, what your marketing playbook is. Is it an awareness campaign where the conversion is number of folks who have kind of visited your website, if you will, or if it's an e-commerce campaign where your conversion is directly attributed to number of sales? These kind of subtleties are very important. So KPIs and having these KPIs defined as part of the intent is fundamental in building a monetization strategy. Um, Let me kind of take back a bit and talk about a few interesting use cases when it comes to monetization intent. I'm not going to take the name of the company, but a very popular dating website, and I hope that some of you are part of that dating website. It's a great experience, to be honest. It's a simple dating app where you log in with your Facebook account and you have many others willing companions or partners or daters, whatever you want to call them. You swipe right and left and you match and then you talk and you go date, right? Um, Curious enough, what do you think would be their digital intent? What's their goal? How did they come into the digital space and what's their goal in the digital space? Interesting enough, their goal is not to have a person date more than twice with the same person, right? It's a dating website trying to put you with somebody of like-mindedness with whom you can, spend some time. But their digital intent is they don't want you to date a person from the app more than twice. So if you date them once, and if there's any clear communication between you and the other person, they track them to the point that they know exactly who you're targeting, what kind of profile you're really interested in, who is interested in you. They start giving you recommendations. They profile the timing. They also kind of segment you based on different words you use, your sentence construction, your grammatical usage, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very interesting way to put together different data points, which is very beautifully crafted. And they're one of the fastest growing companies in the world, and they're making millions and billions of dollars by simply connecting people using algorithms, understanding your social engagement with somebody very personal. And their privacy policies are pretty straightforward. I mean, they can use pretty much everything that you're sharing with somebody using their app, which means they have all that information. The reason why I gave this kind of use, why I use this use case is because an intent is so important. So that company, if you kind of go through some of their initial humble beginnings, they would very clearly tell you that they were focusing on creating an experience in the digital world and creating that specific intent for the particular use case. So that's what really happens. The fundamentals. Understand what you want to achieve with the digital foray. To not just jump into the digital bandwagon and say, hey, you know what, I'm going digital. I want to make more dollars using the digital experience. I want to go take my customers through a fantastic digital experience. Or you know what, I'm going to spend all the money I've made from my offline business and pump it into my online business and just grow it. It doesn't work that way. So which is why one of the fundamental pillars of monetization strategy is having a very clear digital intent that can be understood, well defined, well measured, and has a very tactical way of implementing it. And that's what we will transition towards the second broad pillar. The second broad pillar here is basically the execution. Okay, you figured out what your product or service is. You know how you're going to launch those products and services in the digital space. You know how you want to monetize it. You have specific technology vendors in mind that you've evaluated to run it. You have a budget to run it. You have a timeline to run it. You've figured all these things out, but here comes the big interesting part, which is execution. Um, Interesting to note that more than 80% of any company, no matter what size, scale, and what kind of money they have always fail in the first attempt to get into the digital world and make money out of it. They always have failed. Any e-commerce website that has made money, quick money in the digital space, has failed multiple times before they have gotten into anything that's even break even, if you will. Which is why thinking beyond what you have today in your offline business or thinking beyond what you've defined as your e-commerce business or a digital business is essential. And that thinking beyond needs to be tied to a very practical, tactical execution plan. Now, execution plan is people, process, technology, right? As simple as it may sound. But people do the reverse. They go from technology, they go buy a technology, they go evaluate a technology, then they figure out the process, and then they go invest in people, or they understand how the people part of it works. Right? When I say people, it includes the people who are running the execution, people who are consuming the execution, the clients, the consumers, the stakeholders, everybody. Here's where the big problem is, because it's not technology, process, and people. It's people, process, and technology. Technology is an enabler, which is one of the biggest myth that has been what's been around as a myth is that technology is everything that you need. You invest in technology, you can make miracles happen in the digital world. It's absolutely wrong. Nothing happens with technology just implemented with not having clear process or the right people to run it, which is why it's essential to have a very clear execution plan. Quick, interesting references. It has been observed that most of the digital execution spend goes in creating creative content. You have to come up with a scheme, you have to come up with a theme, you have to build a creative content. If it's a global company, it needs to be translated, localized, built, executed, and then you need to find a way to measure what comes out of the content effectiveness, A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing, optimization, and so on and so forth. And then after spending a lot of money, you're still sitting there wondering, what did I do? Right? The marketing team is not able to attribute it. Um, Keep it simple. It's as easy as that, as easy as it may sound. Let me take an example of an industry that has been sitting with a lot of data, right? Insurance and banking companies, banking and financial corporations as an industry has loads of data. They are legacy companies, right? They're one of the first adopters of data as a concept, right? They started building consumer data as a concept way before the digital invasion into all the industries today. Nobody cared about consumer or personal data more than the financial corporations than ever. So they have a lot of data sitting with them, which they can basically consume, use, slice, and dice. And they are the ones who are really, really behind when it comes to digital adoption. Surprisingly, it is because of the legacy that they're really struggling with. It's because they're not able to execute those digital strategies with the legacy data that's sitting on them. So, as part of this whole discussion about how to monetize, and by means of monetization, I'm not only referring to dollars; it's also value and brand equity, if you will. It all goes back to simplifying it and keeping it very easy. Let me give you a reference. One of the largest software companies, again, into B2C and B2B software applications used in media and digital industry, if you will. I kind of did a consulting gig with them for 6 months in their headquarters. And what I realized when I finished those 6 months, there are a few interesting observations. Number one, they manage almost everything in Excel sheets, including the financial data. And I was sitting there with absolute disbelief that a company of that size, a multi-billion dollar company, uses Excel, Microsoft Excel, to basically run their finances. And this came as both as a surprise, and also I sat back and think that why are they doing that? So I had a wonderful opportunity to talk to the CFO, and I asked him, hey, I'm just surprised that with all those nice, cool, fancy systems available in the market to manage your finances, you use an Excel sheet. How does it work? And he just gave a smirk, and he smiled at me and said, hey, boss, it works. And I sat back and it made me think. And then it goes back to my point earlier. Make it easy, make it simple. Keep it as simple as possible. It's kind of the mantra here. So digital execution should not be complicated by a data fatigue, by technology fatigue, by consulting fatigue, and all those expensive things and jazzy things that you go spend money on. It's more about how end application is going to look like and keep it very simple. In terms of monetizing all your digital presence in the market today, you don't have to be the coolest in the market, but you have to be the most profitable in the market because that's what is going to be long lasting. So know the industry that you're coming from. Understand the nuances of transforming your offline business to online or your new venture into the online digital space. Create an environment where you understand the specifics of what you're doing and keep the execution simple. It always starts with the proof of concepts. It always starts with a pilot. It always starts with simple steps. Nurture yourself to build into the digital foray. Do not jump into it by just pulling in deep wallets. That doesn't work as an execution strategy in digital monetization. And I can tell you with loads of experience dealing with marquee clients who are Fortune 100s, Fortune 50s, who have all realized this mistake today. And today, I mean, my fellow colleagues who are watching me from the service industry or digital service provider industry would know today customers do not want to sign $1 million plus checkbook with you. They don't want to sign a check of $1 million just like that because they understand that it's just not something that they can show as an ROI to their senior management with a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year project term, right? So they're all looking for programs, agile, scrum-based development, execution, and build. So just to recap, we spoke about very strong digital intent. Know what you want to do. Have strong KPIs to measure them. Keep the execution simple. Start humble. Do not show your money up front. Keep it very specific to you. Build on people who can run this for you. Create a strong in-house structure to run this for you. These are two essential part of the monetization strategy. Um, do not do things for the sake of it. That's as simple as it can sound for the execution part of it. So we spoke of three pillars. We've kind of addressed the big beast, the digital intent or the intent with which you want to run this, how you want to run it, the execution part of it, which is definitely cumbersome. You will fail. So might as well fail with a smaller investment rather than fail with a larger investment. Do not be over ambitious because digital industry is one industry that changes by the second. So you should not make some hasty decisions just based on what looks fancy in front of you. And most importantly, you have to understand who you're engaging as partners because it's very essential. These are part of the first two pillars, and we come to the third pillar, which is an absolutely important pillar. that's missing in the market today, which is why I kind of shifted. So if you look at my experience, I've been mostly in the digital campaign world, setting up large digital campaign execution setups for large companies across the globe. And I realized that, hey, companies are getting smarter with, setting up execution, building the digital presence for themselves, personalization, and so on and so forth. But they're not really connecting the dots. The feedback loop is missing, and the feedback loop here is essential because again, going back to the problem statement that we discussed earlier, the number one problem statement any CMO faces today is that how do I attribute my marketing spend to revenue? Right? It could be digital, offline, whatever it is. I'm spending $1 in marketing. How much of my revenue is attributed to it? The sales comes in and says, "Oh yeah, fine marketing. You gave me some leads, but I converted it, and these guys are already in my database. They're part of my CRM." So the classic tussle between the marketers and the sales. They're not able to attribute the dollar spent to revenue, and then 3 years down the line, the CEOs sit there and wonder, "Hey, did we do the right thing? Did we really do the right thing by spending like $1 million in this particular paid media, while the same data and the same conversion could have been achieved with some simple tactics online?" Those are the kind of revelations that are happening with the large companies these days. Which is why this third pillar, the third section of the monetization strategy is very, very important. It is basically the feedback loop. It's basically the insights coming out of all that you've spent and all that you've put through, which is why it is essential that you have a very strong analytical setup, both in-house and also leveraging, vendors and finding the right partners who can do that for you. Measure and use that measurement as a key input for your future spend. Absolutely necessary. I can't stress the importance of this particular pillar because this is where most of the customers or most of our clients do not have a support layer available. They do not know how to connect the dots. They do not know how to build insights. Hey, cool, I've built a huge data lake. I've built a great BI infrastructure. I have a great marketing team running my digital marketing programs. I have loads of money, but I do not know how to connect them all and put a story in front of them. Which is why this third pillar is absolutely essential. Um, and within this third pillar, there are a few subtle nuances here which I want to quickly talk about. Analytics is a big game, right? Analytics is not just about doing analysis on a bunch of data. It's also about creating some tangible insights which can be used by the marketers, which can be used by the business to make decisions. This sounds cliche and this sounds like a sales pitch, but I'm going to make it anyways. Do not make decisions based on what your data tells in your dashboard. Today, the biggest challenge we're facing is we're having dashboard fatigue. Every CMO is sitting with like a zillion dashboards in front of them, each talking about a metric, each talking about a KPI, but none telling him a story, none telling him what to do, right? The economy, I don't know if you guys have read the Freakonomics book. It's a fantastic book, and you should talk about how they attribute and correlate strange things happening around you to something that happens on a day-to-day basis, which you would have never assumed or even guessed that they're connected. Something like a storm in Africa can increase the fuel prices in India, something like that. I'm just making that up. But, those kind of connections, those kind of stories behind the data is essential. Monetization is an ongoing effort. You can't just build a process and say, okay, yeah, I'm done with my digital setup and it's going to make money on its own for me. It doesn't happen that way. There's always something or somebody or some company that's eating your pie, and you need to be really smart on the game. And that is why we call it the continuous analytics, right? The analytics is something that you need to do constantly. You need to constantly validate hypothesis and build that strong analytics and insights structure within your organization. Blue Ocean as a company has a very strong competence in solving some of those challenges. And the way we approach it is also very interesting. We do not just go and say, hey, we're going to come and do these analysis for you. We're going to solve a problem statement for you. We never go with that. We go with saying that, hey, let's work together as partners. Let's be partners in crime. Let's get in and co-innovate and co-build solutions together because there's no other way you can do this. If any agency or if any vendor in the market out there would come and tell you, I can solve you this $1 million question of attributing your marketing spend to revenue without any sort of inputs from the customer or working with the customer, I would absolutely put them down because that's impossible. It needs to be a partnership. It needs to be working with capabilities both within the organization and also the organization to drive it. Sorry for the small digression there, but I just wanted to emphasize on the fact that it's very important to drive um, that level of thought process within the organization as a DNA so that they understand that analytics is going to play a very important role in defining how monetization works currently, kind of understand how it works currently, and also define the future. Build the future based on those cues that you get from it. And I'm going to quickly digress into a use case. One of the Fortune 50 customers, they really haven't had a very strong social media presence. So they really ventured into the social media and they went on everywhere like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, all the cliche top social media platforms, if you will. If you look at the products and services they provide, they're very high tech, right? It's a high tech product company. They thought that, hey, you know what, I'm going to target both B2C and B2B by going to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all the cliche social media. And for some sort of experimentation sake, one of the marketers decided to start going on Snapchat. And as I don't know how many of you have even been on Snapchat, I was there briefly and I really couldn't handle it. Snapchat is a kind of a social media platform or an app primarily used by the millennials and the teenagers, if you will, age group anywhere between 13 to 26. That's the age group that primarily uses Snapchat today. They realized that they had the most audience targeted through Snapchat. It came as a surprise, but this level of innovative, creative experimentation is essential to build a very strong monetization strategy. You will never know what's going to make money for you. Like, for example, a company that was started a few years ago. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Twitch. They basically decided to, go online, look for these heavy-duty gamers, and have these gamers play games, and have others as community watch them play the games. And it was eventually purchased, and it was, I think, Amazon bought them for $1 billion, and they had a good 10% plus site traffic uh, in the last few years that I've kind of followed them. So as you can understand, it's also about making money through being innovative and creative and finding that little unicorn that really exists in the digital space. It's pretty interesting how people find those unique ideas that make sense. Even the large corporations try something very innovative. I was working as a vendor for another software company who were into creative design software production, not Adobe. They kind of eventually realized that most of their products requires a lot of nurturing. You mean from a capability and competency to work on their products was the learning curve was pretty steep. It takes a lot of time. So they came up with a very interesting digital community thought leadership, and they created a community where they said anybody who can come and join this community gets their free software. The software is worth like a few $1,000s. They would just give it away for free and build community of user base. And the only criteria being you should be either a kid or a school going kid between the age group of 13 to 16. So they targeted those teenagers, if you will, and they said they can have the software for absolutely free. They would even get free training, and that way they wanted to create a user base for the software. So if you look at it from a monetization 101, it's not going to make any money. In fact, you're losing money. But if you look at it from a long-term point of view, 5 years, 6 years down the line, they're building a community of people who can, use and interact their product. So monetization is not just about quick money. And as a throw-in, it's very important to be paced out and understand how you can nurture your potential customers from the bud, and then which is why digital can be so powerful because it can take you to those kind of demographics which you would usually not be able to reach with any sort of other traditional reach out. So again, just to reiterate, the three broad pillars: have a very strong intent, have a very tactical, grounded, simple, easy to deploy execution plan, well tested, and then have a process to feedback what you've implemented through smart analytical tools and services available both internal and outside. And also be innovative. Look for the unicorn that can make the next dollar for you as a business. So these are my three broad pillars, which I felt would be very interesting to talk about. Um, from a strategy point of view, those were the three pillars I wanted to quite discuss, but I just also wanted to close the conversation with a few interesting leave backs, if you will. Um, interesting enough, one industry that has been not discussed much in the digital forum, but I'm going to take the courage to talk about them because they are really changing the way the digital presence works today. And interesting enough, large e-commerce companies like Amazon's and eBay's are also advertising with them. I'm talking about the pornography industry. It's almost kind of a taboo that people don't talk about it when it comes to the digital explosion that we're going through. Whether you like it or not, that industry attracts the most site traffic and site spend time than any other industry put together. So Google vouches behind it. All the other site web traffic companies vouch behind it. Pornography is basically taking in the most site traffic, and they are doing it all under the sheets, right? So, as the pun is definitely intended there. So, and I'm not even talking about the dark web, which some claim has more site traffic than all other legitimate and legal site websites that's available in the market. So, interesting enough, why I picked up that example is because even non-traditional way of doing digital marketing can sometimes be beneficial as long as it's all legal and it's within the papers. I'm not recommending anything that you need to do under the carpet. But I'm saying legal ways to monetize and utilize the consumer segments visits is essential. So the impressions that we're talking about, these sites are garnering loads of impressions. So it's also something that's non-traditional that we need to somehow find ways to monetize. So some companies do and some companies don't, but it's up to your ethical conundrums that we face. But that's an interesting kind of trivia. And one of my friend who works for a very leading high tech company recently kind of confessed that they do some sort of soft commercials and advertisements on these kind of websites, mostly because they have the right kind of audience segmentation in place. And this industry collects data extensively. They personalize your content. They have a very smart way of running digital industry that actually makes a lot of money, and they have a very strong way to attribute marketing spend to revenue. So, there's something to learn from this industry, if not anything. And I strongly encourage marketers to go beyond the traditional norms, kill the taboo, and look at it from a futuristic point of view and see how these things can help. And another interesting trivia: virtual reality as a concept was first adopted and heavily used by the pornography industry. While it was even being discussed in the market, they already have adopted it. So it's how interesting that somebody or some industry that's not kind of given a legal recognition or some sort of social recognition, if you will, is actually driving innovation in building that kind of digital presence for us. So it's a very interesting point that we all should think about. Moving along, and as you know, the search engine, Google specifically, is basically running us. They basically know everything. I think Google knows what I'm saying right now. It possibly can predict what I'm going to say in the future as well. So these powerful companies, Google, Facebook, and the big guys, are definitely are getting more smarter, and they're getting more intelligent, and they're trying to drive our business by being an integral part of our ecosystem. It's almost like monopolizing our data, monopolizing our industries, if you will. So my leeway or something that you can think about is that how do we think beyond these big guys? How can we do business beyond Google and Facebook and Twitters and LinkedIn's? It might sound difficult, but trust me, there are industries who are challenging this. For example, as a company, we received a call, some sort of an inside sales call, if you will. And this guy is a truck driver who has been driving trucks for the last 10 years, and he now has expanded his business, and he has a fleet of 30 trucks today that he runs across the US. And he was asking us, how can I go into social media? How can I build a social media presence? How can I build personalization for myself? So um, it's interesting that opportunities exist in these kind of industries that we're not even looking at. So for all my friends out there in the digital marketing space or the digital space, we need to think beyond the industries that are currently in the journey. Another few interesting facts: India would potentially have 500 million smartphones in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a lot of smartphones, right? And out of the 7.5 billion population on Earth, 4 billion of them have smartphones, and they drive 74% of buying journey decision making process. They're influential in the buying process. They're used as a medium or a channel for buying process. I think from an opportunity to explore further, mobile is going to just be more explosive from here on, especially with the technology these mobile phones come with in the future. They will really redefine how your monetization works, how things work, with artificial and assisted intelligence, machine learning, device level data learning. We're getting smarter by the day. The data is just overwhelming. I think it's the right time to invest and build a very strong structure to create a strategy for you to build that extra dollar for every dollar that you spend. On that note, I just want to close by saying that thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope the different things I spoke of was interesting. You can reach out to me either after this session or even personally on my LinkedIn profile. Do ask questions. I'll be happy to chat.